Adamantite-ranked adventurers desire an audience with you, Master. Flutter looked upon the man with suspicion. He had not arranged for a meeting with anyone. Flutter was the highest-ranked magic caster in the Empire. He had a lot of work to do, and then he needed to conduct his own magical research on top of that. He simply did not have any free time. He could not simply nod when someone said they wanted to meet him. In the Empire, only the Emperor could see him without making an appointment in advance. That said, he could not summarily reject the request. Adamantite-ranked adventurers were heroes. They were individuals, but they were not beings he could simply overlook. The same applied even for a great magic caster like Flutter. At times, he would request them to help him find exotic objects, so he could not just ignore them. Are they from Silver Canary? Or 8 Ripples? He spoke the names of the Empire's 2 Adamantite-ranked adventurer teams. However, his disciple shook his head. No. They are a duo calling themselves Darkness. They even produced adamantite plates to prove their identity. What did you say? The adventurer team Darkness name was well known throughout the kingdom. Even with just 2 members, they had accomplished many heroic deeds. Apparently, they had recently challenged Jaldabaoth, who had caused havoc in the royal capital, and fought him off. Why would people like that come to see him? Several questions appeared in his heart, but more than that, he wanted to discuss magical knowledge with the beautiful Princess Nabe, said to be a very high-level magic caster. He immediately cast his doubts to the back of his mind. However, he was the Emperor's servant, after all, and he remembered that his Lord Jerknev wanted to see them. He would bring the matter up after their meeting. Flutter gave orders to his disciples as he thought. Show them the way. I will tidy myself up and head over immediately. Part 3. I didn't expect there to actually be ruins. What a shock. While I thought that it probably wouldn't be a lie, given the sizable payout, I can't believe there was actually an unexplored ruin smack in the middle of a grass plain like this. Really surprising, right? As they heard Hecarim ask that, his comrades responded with their agreement apparently. This was a tomb of some sort, but when they actually saw it, it seemed to be sunk into the earth itself, as though something had pressed it down, like a basin. One possible reason why ruins like these had not been explored was because the surrounding land was grass as far as the eye could see, with no remains of ancient cities nearby to draw adventurers' attention. In addition, small hillocks of dirt were scattered around it like stars in the sky, so even if there were ruins buried in one of them, they would have missed it. The central building protruded a little, but one could only see it after climbing to a high vantage like this. Part of the dirt wall surrounding the ruins had collapsed, exposing part of the walls, which was how the ruins had been discovered. That was the shared opinion of the various teams. No doubt about it. In truth, I'm quite excited about this. After all, unexplored ruins might contain startling treasures. That's a bit hard to say, but given that there haven't been any problems for the area around the ruins, it's pretty clear that there aren't any dangerous monsters within. More than that, I'm more uneasy that our client actually specified a location for a base camp. The campsite was situated on the plains. One could say it was an ideal location. Since it was surrounded by scattered hillocks, which blocked line of sight, they did not have to worry about being spotted from afar. All they had to do was be mindful of the light from their fires and torches, and it would be very hard for others to spot them. And because of that, he was afraid. How did our client know about this place? The most likely answer was that the client had searched for an ideal location for a campsite around here for some reason. That would explain a lot. But if that were the case, it would raise more questions in turn. For instance, why had the client thought of having them camp in such a secluded spot, and why would an imperial noble enter the kingdom's territory? I once heard that there was a massive criminal organization in the kingdom, called 8 Fingers, if I'm not wrong. They say that organization did a lot of evil things. I heard they even did smuggling to the empire. Some of my thief friends complained that they were really influential in the kingdom, so investigating them would cause a lot of problems. Imina pressed down her wind-tossed hair and spoke after Archie finished. Roberdick spoke in quiet tones, like he was spitting on the ground. I've heard about their drugs. When used properly, medicines can be very helpful. But these people turn medicine into narcotics, which they sell to and use to harm the weak. I find that very displeasing. That he raised his voice slightly could not be helped. After all, Roberdick had become a worker to help the weak. That's enough talk of all this idle fantasy that has nothing to do with the job. According to Archie's research, our client isn't doing anything dubious, but might be the subject of a purge, is he not? Perhaps I didn't investigate thoroughly enough, or it was very well hidden, Archie said quietly. However, Hecarim paid it no heed, and looked to the others for confirmation. Well, I think everyone understands. Of course. Don't mention that in front of the other teams. After all, workers sometimes get requests from 8 Fingers for smuggling. We won't shoot our mouths off if there's a chance any of the other teams might be involved with that group. At least, until we're done with this job. Still, there's no telling how many people's tears went into our payment, and how dirty it is. Even if the money's dirty, a payout is still a payout, and you can survive on it. Roberdick glanced at Archie, then inhaled and exhaled deeply to cool himself down. My apologies, I was being rude. It's fine, I almost said something rude myself. Please forgive me. Please don't worry about it, because you didn't actually say anything. I just wanted you to know that was how I thought about it. I'm not looking for spiritual fullness, but material satisfaction. However, Archie quickly raised her hand, to indicate she was not done yet. I've been doing my best to avoid doing things that harm my companions, because I've seen many people who destroyed themselves in pursuit of their desires. I believe you, Archie. Archie nodded and nobody said anything to her. The message had been passed even without speaking. They had all argued with each other several times in the past, and they had long since built up a relationship of mutual trust. So, what do you guys think? I feel that the tomb might be ruled by some kind of entity. Hecarim's eyes carefully studied the cut grass. That aside, the angel and goddess statues positioned all over the place were very intricately carved, making onlookers gasp in awe. It was evident at a glance that they had been regularly maintained. In contrast, the trees standing everywhere around the graveyard were twisted and drooping, creating a gloomy atmosphere. There was no order in the way the tombstones were arranged, sticking up from the ground like the teeth of some ugly witch. They felt very out of place in contrast to the cleaned portions. Someone was in charge of this place. However, that someone was not a normal person, went the frightening conjecture which rose from the pit of his stomach. In order to banish the chill that ran through him, Hecarim turned his attention to the huge building. There was a mausoleum in the north, south, east and west of the graveyard interior, and in the center was a magnificent mausoleum. 8 tall warrior statues were positioned around the great mausoleum. They radiated an oppressive feeling, as though they were intent on eliminating all threats and evildoers who came near the mausoleum. The vegetation in the graveyard's been neatly trimmed. There isn't even a trace of algae here, so someone must be taking good care of it. But what kind of person are they? Indeed, each team, Tenbu aside, had felt something was amiss when they researched the records about the job. Looking around at the place itself, what they saw was plains and more plains. It was singularly unsuited to building a tomb. For starters, one had to consider the convenience factor. Building such a luxurious tomb in such a deserted place made no sense at all. It was far too inconvenient. It would be understandable if this was not to honor the dead, but to serve as a memorial to future generations. After all, people sometimes built monuments upon places where great deeds took place. However, in that case, the fact that this great accomplishment had not been passed down in history felt entirely unnatural. All the teams had shared the information they had gathered, but there was no relevant data among it, which indicated that this ruin might have been erased from history. It all seemed highly irregular. There was a bizarre sensation, like something stuck in his throat, and it made him furrow his brows. Still, there might be a big incident depending on who's staying in the ruins. Have you checked up on that yet? I just hope they're not innocent people. The brains of the various teams put their heads together just now, and they said that the guild doesn't know anything about ruins in this area. It's also far from the nearby villages, so it's not likely that there'll be commoners around. If there's anyone here, then they'll be illegal squatters, the kind who can't show their faces in public, or monsters. Since there's no traces of footprints exiting the ruins, what we came up with was that either the creatures inside don't need to eat or drink, or the interior of the ruins are self-sustaining. However, since we know too little, we're limited to stereotypes for further theory crafting, which might lead to our thinking being constrained. That's where we left our consideration of the ruins. Once people discovered a set of ruins, news about it would be disseminated to various government organizations through the Adventurers Guild, and the first people to discover it would have investigation rights for a limited period. Under that arrangement, those people who discovered ruins, which had been previously unknown to the nation, or the Adventurers Guild had unspoken permission to kill any illegal squatters occupying the ruins. In that respect, they had adopted a policy of kill them on suspicion. Perhaps this was a very brutal policy, but humans were weak creatures in this world. Therefore, beings of unknown provenance occupying territory at the edge of human lands would be very troublesome. The fact was, roughly 20 years ago, there had been a group called Zuranon which occupied a set of ruins, performed frightening experiments, and caused a major disaster. An entire city had been destroyed while everyone had sat back and watched due to a lack of information. The guild made that rule in order to prevent the same kind of mistakes from happening again. Under normal circumstances, it'd probably be the undead. If the undead really have taken over these ruins, then we'll need to clear them out and consecrate the place to disperse the negative energy, else it'll be bad, right? Like you said, it would be very bad. Leaving the undead be will only lead to the appearance of more powerful undead. That's why powerful undead often appear in places like ruins and so on. It would save a lot of trouble if they were just golems tidying up the ruins on orders from their previous masters. Then, what do you plan to do after this? I think Hecarim should attend the meeting in my place. Don't worry about it, the other team leaders didn't take part either, right? This is called making full use of one's resources, millimeter. Hecarim winked at Archie, and she sighed with deliberate loudness. In any case, all the teams will move in after dark. We'll enter from 4 directions at once and meet up at the central mausoleum. I see, because we'll be spotted more easily when entering in the day. Correct. The surrounding terrain was open, and there were no signs of observers or travelers. Thus, entering directly was also a valid option, but they had to be on watch against unexpected situations. It was somewhat safer to move around in the dark. Besides, they might still be able to learn something if they continued observing the ruins, though they only had until nightfall. This job was under time constraints, but it would not hurt to spend some time here. That was probably what the smart people thought. Perhaps they really wanted to continue observing the place for several more days. Still, can't we scout safely with invisibility? I'd thought of that as well. However, since a troublesome situation might arise, it would be better to go in all at once, so at least we'd be able to learn something. Invisibility spells were not perfect, there were many ways to see through them. If the workers approached with magic, and they were spotted by someone, by the tomb's sentries, it would raise their alertness level, and they might not be able to enter at all for the next few days. In order to avoid that, they opted for a plan where everyone would go in together. Hecarim understood that point and nodded. While there were still some holes in the plan, this was the best balance they could strike between risk and effectiveness. In that case, we'll be resting for now? Yes, Darkness and Screaming Whip will be in charge of security, but for safety's sake, and to keep everyone on their toes, the various teams will be assigning sentries to keep an eye on things. We're going in order of arrival at the Count's estate, and rotating every 2 hours. I see, so we're the last, then. Yes, it'll be a while before it's our turn. Saying so, Archie cricked her neck and worked her shoulders. Thanks for your hard work. Archie nodded to Roberdick. I'm so tired. We spent so much time, because that idiot wanted to just barge into the ruins. It took us a lot of time to talk him down. That man doesn't know the meaning of teamwork at all. Ah, that sword genius guy. Just call him goddamn son of a bitch. Hecarim smiled to Imina, whose murderous intent was steaming off her, and tried to change the topic. In that case, I'll be heading back to the campsite to slowly wait our turn. I approve. I don't think it'll rain for a while, but we'd best prepare just in case. Imina-san, it's your turn, so please try not to look so scary. Fine. Ah, it just pisses me off. I want to stab him to death. I'm pitching my tent away from them. As long as you stay within the designated campgrounds. It was not actually a good thing, but it was much better than pitching a tent nearby, and then getting into a fight. The four of them turned their backs on the ruins and left the plains. Still, the more I think about it, the stranger it seems. No wonder the Count put out a request like this. The group turned around as they heard Archie's voice, and saw her staring at the ruins. I can't tell the age or the background of these ruins at all. It's as though they just suddenly appeared in this era. It feels out of place. Those carvings look just like the carvings in the region before the demon gods rampaged through this area, but those carvings had an Eastern flavor to them. And then there's these cross-shaped tombstones. No, I still don't get it. As he listened to Archie's scholarly dissertation, Hecarim had to suppress the wicked smile on his face, and he barely managed to hide the excitement in his heart. So you're saying that we might find some very interesting treasure there then? Yeah, I'm sure there'll be some amazing treasure in there. Either that, or some very frightening undead. Yuwa, how scary, that's a horrible imitation, Hecarim. It doesn't look like me at all. And you're trying to copy my voice too, that's just gross. Yes, sorry about that. Still, I'm kind of looking forward to it. Oh yes. Why does this tomb exist, and who was buried here? It piques my curiosity. That's right. Exploring the unknown always gets me a little jumpy. And money. I hope there's a lot of treasure. Hecarim looked at the smiling faces of his companions, and satisfaction filled his heart. While everyone here had done dirty jobs for money, it was not of their own free will. In truth, everyone here preferred adventurer work. There was no telling if Archie would be able to continue adventuring with them once she had to start supporting her sisters. Once Archie left the team, it might take a while to find their next member, and even if they found one, they would have to take on easier jobs before they blended into the team. Perhaps this job, as the last one with their current members, was the best choice. In the future, maybe we can take adventuring jobs, like adventurers. No, it would be good if we could go explore the unknown together. Hecarim looked to the heavens at the sprawling, boundless sky. As sunset slowly shrouded the world, the workers filed out of their cleverly concealed low tents. As the ones charged with carrying out clandestine operations, it was time for them to work. The adventurers had already prepared a meal for them. They started by lighting several white bricks of solid fuel, then added charcoal to it. Since they had cast darkness on the fire beforehand, there was no illumination which would otherwise have lit up the surroundings. Darkness only eliminated light, it did not extinguish flames. Then, they boiled the water from a pouch of infinite water over the lightless, yet vigorous blaze. They poured the boiled water into wooden bowls, and the travel rations within lost their shape, and a fragrant smell of soup steamed forth. That, along with hard bread, was what everyone ate. After that, it was up to personal preference. The bowls were filled with yellowish soup, the type which workers liked, made to provide nutrition, and to be stored for a long time. Some people would add thin slices of jerky to the soup, some sprinkled spices onto it, and others would simply consume it straight. Dinner was over with that bowl of soup. When one considered the amount of activity they would soon be performing, it seemed like a pitiful amount. However, eating too much would affect their upcoming work. At the same time, not eating enough was also dangerous, because there was no telling when they would be able to eat again. Their supply of emergency ration bars was also limited, because carrying too many would hinder movement. A compromise had to be made in this area. They handed the empty bowls to the adventurers, and then the workers shouldered their pre-packed bags. Under the watchful eyes of the adventurers, the workers set off in unison. The adventurers would be guarding this campsite, and they would not follow them to the ruins. To begin with, they circled around the base of the hill, and then dispersed around the ruins. They had already arranged to launch a flare into the sky if they were attacked at this stage. Many people wore full-plate armor, whose cumbersome bulk and noise did not seem quite suitable for stealth operations, but that was only within the constraints of normal thinking. For those who could use magic to violate common sense, it was a trivial matter. First, they cast Silence. This spell smothered all sounds within a certain distance, be it the clanking of armor plates, or that of running across the ground. After that was Invisibility. That spell made it difficult for observers to detect them with the naked eye. For safety's sake, they had a ranger in the air with Invisibility, Fly, and Hawkeye cast on him to keep an eye on their surroundings. He was equipped with special arrows imbued with a paralysis effect to deal with any sudden situation that might develop. The group reached their destination under this double layer of protection. It was time for the main event. Their plan was to ascend the slope, then drop down onto the ruins several meters below. Then, they would search the surface portion, and then meet up at the central mausoleum. All this had to be done while the invisibility spells were still in effect. That said, everyone had to move in sync in order to keep people from going off script. However, it was late at night, and everyone was invisible, so it would be very difficult to verify each other's location. However, they had already taken that problem into consideration. Strange sticks, each about 30 centimeters long, suddenly appeared on the ground. The sticks floated into the air like someone was holding them, and after they were bent, they glowed dimly. These special sticks, glow sticks, could be bent, upon which the alchemical solutions within would combine and emit light. The reason why they had been dropped to the ground was because invisibility also affected everything the subject of the spell was carrying. In order to keep an item visible, it had to be removed from the subject's person. The light shook back and forth a few times, and then the sticks broke. Having served their purpose, they then poured glowing alchemical solution onto the ground and covered it up with dirt, neatly concealing it. In this way, they learned that things were going smoothly for the workers everywhere, and that they were waiting for the next stage of the plan. While they could not see each other due to the distance, for ropes were simultaneously lowered to the surface of the great underground tomb of Nazareth. This was climbing rope, and it had knots tied at regular intervals along its length. The ends of the rope were tied to iron pitons sunk into the rock, and they creaked as they swayed. If anyone present could see through invisibility, they would be able to see a group of people descending the ropes. This much was nothing even for someone like Archie, who had focused on honing her magical prowess over her physical body, and had not learned much in the way of athletic skills, or rather, it would be better to say that both workers and adventurers needed at least that much physical training. The training and the knots were put to good use as each worker descended without a problem, landing within the tomb grounds. The first destination of each infiltration team was one of the 4 smaller mausoleums in each direction. Now that the effective duration of invisibility was over, everyone came into view again. Each team ran towards their respective mausoleum. They were crouched low, concealing themselves with tombstones, trees or statues, running through the darkened graveyard. During this time, the silence spell was still in effect, so they did not make any noise, and even the warriors in full plate ran with all their might while seeking cover. Their movements were swift and fluid, like shadows racing across the land. Heavy Masher's leader Gringam slowly approached the mausoleum, and his eyes went wide. That was because the mausoleum was grander than he had imagined. While it was one of the smaller directional mausoleums, that was only in comparison to the huge central mausoleum. At a closer look, the structure was so impressive that its incredible grandeur made the breath catch in his throat. The white stone walls gleamed like they had been planed flat. Many years should have passed since it had been built, yet there was no trace of weathering or stains from the wind and the rain. A massive steel door stood atop a flight of 3 steps made from single slabs of rock. The door itself was polished and free of rust, and glinted with a dark, metallic light. Just seeing this structure was enough to tell them how well it had been maintained. In other words, the tomb was definitely occupied. As Gringam reached that conclusion, the thief among his companions stepped forward and began inspecting the steps. Gringam saw the thief gesture to him, because of the silence spell, to move away from him, and so he slowly backed off. This was to avoid being caught in an area effect trap. The thief checked very carefully. It was somewhat frustrating, but it could not be helped. Apparently, people's souls resided in their bodies, and when the body started to decay, the soul would be summoned to the side of the gods. That was why the dead were essentially buried in graveyards right away, in the embrace of the earth. But this was different for certain nobles and those in power. If one buried the body right away, verifying the decay of the body would require an exhumation of the grave. Therefore, in order to personally verify the decay of the deceased, these powerful people would not be buried immediately after death, but left in state for a while. However, nobody would choose to put their corpses in their own homes. Instead, they would choose to have their bodies stored in the mausoleums of the graveyards. The corpse would be placed there for a period of time, and once the decay began, the priests would bear witness to the fact that the soul had, in fact, departed the body to be with the gods. The bodies in question would be placed within a communal space within the mausoleum. There would be several stone slabs within a wide open space, and the corpses would be laid out on the slabs. The sight of rotting cadavers laid out in a row ought to have been a gruesome sight, but within this world's frame of reference, it was an exceedingly normal sight. However, if one were as wealthy and powerful as a great noble, things would once again be slightly different. They would not use a communal mausoleum, but an ancestral tomb. People believed that these were temporary resting places for the mighty to abide before they were summoned before the spirits of their family, and so being able to possess a family mausoleum was a symbol of power.